Before I share my story, let me ask you, what would you do if the person who broke your heart thought he'd get away with it, until the truth played out for everyone to see? I thought my divorce would be the end of my story, a quiet defeat. But the day my husband smiled in court, I realized I'd spent years letting him control the narrative, never knowing what was about to come to light. This isn't just a story about betrayal or justice. It's about the moment you decide to stop shrinking for someone else's comfort and the power of truth, especially when it's caught on camera. So settle in, and if you've ever wondered what you'd do in my shoes, hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next changed not just my marriage, but the way I see myself forever. The day my husband smiled at our divorce hearing, I realized I'd spent my whole life letting him write the story, never knowing the truth would play out for everyone to see. It started with a lie, not the kind that comes in a burst of anger, but the kind that grows slowly, quietly, until it's woven into the fabric of your life. My husband, Tom, had always been charming, quick with a joke, generous with compliments, the kind of man who made everyone feel special. I fell for him fast, swept up in the whirlwind of his attention, his promises, his dreams. We built a life together, bought a house, raised 2 children, hosted dinner parties and holiday gatherings. From the outside, we looked perfect, but inside, cracks were forming. Tom worked late, traveled often, came home with stories that didn't quite add up. I told myself it was just stress, that he was doing it for us, that things would get better. But the distance grew. The laughter faded. The love that had once felt so easy became hard work I was doing alone. The day Tom told me he wanted a divorce, I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming for months. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he flinched when I touched him. He said he needed space, that he wasn't happy, that he wanted to find himself. I nodded, my heart breaking, my hands shaking, my mind racing with questions I was too afraid to ask. I called Ruth, my sister, needing to hear her voice. "Anna, you're stronger than you think," she said, her voice steady. "You'll get through this, you always do." I tried to believe her, but the fear was overwhelming. I worried about the house, the children, the bills. I worried about starting over at my age, about being alone, about losing everything I'd worked so hard to build. Tom moved out, taking only what he needed. He left the house full of memories, photos on the walls, clothes in the closet, the scent of his cologne lingering in the bathroom. The children were confused, their questions sharp and honest. "Why is Dad leaving? Did we do something wrong?" I hugged them, my heart breaking. "No, sweetheart, this isn't your fault. Sometimes grown-ups just need to figure things out." The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and meetings. Tom's lawyer was aggressive, pushing for more than his share, painting me as unstable, unfit, unable to manage on my own. Tom played the part of the wounded husband, his smile sad, his words careful, his eyes full of practiced regret. I tried to fight back, to stand my ground, to protect what was left of my life. But every day felt like a battle, every conversation a test, every decision a reminder of how much I'd lost. The day of the hearing arrived, the sky gray and heavy with rain. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress and the pearl necklace Tom had given me on our 10th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified, unbreakable, the kind of woman who could weather any storm. Ruth came with me, her presence a comfort. We sat in the courtroom, waiting for the judge, the air thick with tension. Tom arrived, his suit pressed, his smile wide. He shook hands with his lawyer, laughed at a joke, glanced my way with a look I couldn't quite read. I felt a wave of anger, sharper than anything I'd ever known. I thought about the years I'd spent making his life easier, about the sacrifices I'd made, about the love I'd given. I wondered when he'd stopped seeing me as his partner, when I'd become just another obstacle in his path. As the hearing began, Tom's lawyer laid out his case, painting me as forgetful, as incapable, as someone who needed to be managed. He brought up every mistake I'd ever made, every bill I'd ever paid late, every time I'd forgotten an appointment or lost my keys. I sat in the courtroom, my hands folded in my lap, my back straight, my heart pounding. I listened as they tried to erase me, to rewrite my story, to take away everything I'd built. But I refused to be erased. if you've ever had to fight for your own story, or if you want to see what happens when the truth finally comes out, don't forget to like and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who tried to tear you down? I read every story, and you never know who you might help by sharing. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. I tried to keep things normal for the children, packing lunches, helping with homework, reading stories at bedtime. But every moment felt heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I found myself double-checking the locks, making lists of chores, writing down every appointment and bill in a notebook, desperate to prove to myself and to the world that I was still capable, still in control. Ruth was my anchor. She came by every evening, bringing dinner, laughter, and the kind of comfort only a sister can give. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. "You're stronger than you think, Anna," she said, her voice gentle. "You've survived worse. You'll survive this." I nodded, my heart aching. I just wish it didn't hurt so much. She squeezed my hand, her eyes full of understanding. "Healing always hurts, Anna, but you're not alone." Tom, meanwhile, seemed to thrive in the chaos. He showed up to every meeting with a new suit, a new story, a new reason why he deserved more. He charmed the lawyers, the judge, even the court clerk. He smiled at me across the table, his eyes cold, his words sharp. "It's nothing personal, Anna," he said one afternoon, his voice low. "It's just business." I stared at him, disbelief and anger warring inside me. "We built this life together, Tom. You can't just walk away and take everything." He shrugged, his smile never faltering. "That's what the law is for." The children sensed the tension, their questions growing more pointed, their silences longer. Lily, my youngest, clung to me at night, her small hands wrapped around my arm. "Is Daddy coming home, Mom?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I hugged her, my heart breaking. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I promise no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." The night before the hearing, I lay awake, listening to the wind in the trees, the creak of the old house, the distant sound of a train on the tracks. I thought about Tom, about the life we'd built, about the family we'd raised. I wondered what he would say if he could see us now, his children caught in the middle, his wife fighting for her dignity. I realized then that sometimes the hardest thing you can do is stand your ground. And sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let yourself be erased. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully, choosing a simple navy dress and the pearl earrings Ruth had given me for my birthday. I wanted to look like myself, dignified, capable, unbreakable. I wanted Tom to see the woman he'd underestimated, the woman he'd tried to erase. Ruth drove me to the courthouse, her presence a comfort. We sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling, the air thick with anticipation. "You're ready, Anna," she said, her voice steady. "You've done everything you can. Now it's time to let the truth speak for itself." I nodded, my heart pounding. "Thank you, Ruth, for everything." She smiled, her eyes shining. "Always, Anna, always." As we walked into the courthouse, I felt a surge of fear and then a wave of resolve. I realized then that I was stronger than I'd ever known. And I promised myself that, whatever happened next, I would never let myself be erased. The courthouse was colder than I remembered, the marble floors echoing with every step. I clutched my folder of documents, bank statements, calendars, letters from neighbors and teachers, my hands trembling, my heart pounding. Ruth walked beside me, her presence a steady anchor in the storm. We sat in the waiting area, watching as lawyers and clients hurried past, their faces set with worry and hope. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself that I was prepared, that I had done everything I could to protect myself and my children. Tom arrived a few minutes later, his suit perfectly pressed, his hair neatly combed. He smiled at me, a practiced, empty smile, and sat across the room with his lawyer. I watched as they whispered together, their heads close, their eyes flicking in my direction. When the judge called us in, I felt a wave of fear wash over me. I stood, smoothing my dress, and followed Ruth into the courtroom. The judge was a woman, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes sharp and kind. She greeted us with a nod, her voice calm and steady. Tom's lawyer went first, laying out his case with practiced ease. He painted Tom as the victim, a hardworking man betrayed by a wife who couldn't manage the household, who was forgetful, who was unstable. He brought up every mistake I'd ever made, every bill I'd ever paid late, every time I'd forgotten an appointment or lost my keys. I sat in silence, my hands folded in my lap, my back straight, my heart pounding. I listened as they tried to erase me, to rewrite my story, to take away everything I'd built. When it was my turn, my lawyer stood, her voice calm and steady. Your Honor, my client is not incompetent. She is not unstable. She manages her own finances, her own home, her own life. We have letters from neighbors, from teachers, from her doctor. We have a journal documenting her daily activities, a calendar of appointments, a record of her independence. The judge nodded, her eyes never leaving mine. Thank you. I'd like to hear from Mrs. Evans herself. I stood, my knees shaking, my voice trembling but strong. Your Honor, I am not perfect. I forget things sometimes. I make mistakes. But I am not helpless. I am not crazy. I am not ready to give up my life. The judge smiled, her eyes kind. Thank you, Mrs. Evans. That's all I needed to hear. Tom's lawyer tried to argue, but the judge held up a hand. I've heard enough. Mrs. Evans is clearly capable of managing her own affairs. Petition denied. A wave of relief washed over me. Ruth squeezed my hand, tears shining in her eyes. I looked at Tom, hopping for a flicker of understanding, of regret, of love. But he just stared at the table, his face pale, his jaw clenched. After the hearing, people stopped me in the hallway. Neighbors, friends, even strangers who'd heard about the case. You were so brave, Anna, one woman said, hugging me tight. You spoke for all of us. I smiled, my heart full. Thank you, I just wanted to be heard. That night, Ruth and I sat on the porch, the stars bright above us, the air cool and sweet. You did it, Anna, she said, her voice full of pride. You stood up for yourself. You showed everyone who you are. I nodded, my heart swelling with gratitude. I did it for me, but I also did it for you, for Lily, for every woman who's ever been told she's too old, too weak, too much. Ruth laughed, her eyes shining. You're never too much, Anna. You're just enough. The relief from the judge's words was still fresh when Tom's lawyer, not ready to give up, requested that the court review additional evidence. He spoke with a confidence that made my stomach twist, as if he had one last card to play. The judge agreed, her expression unreadable. Tom's lawyer produced a USB drive and handed it to the bailiff. Your Honor, this is a video from the home security system, dated 3 months ago. We believe it will show Mrs. Evans' inability to manage the household and her erratic behavior. I felt my heart drop. I remembered the day in question, a day when I'd been especially tired, when Lily had been sick, when the house had been a mess. I remembered Tom setting up the new security cameras, insisting it was for our safety. I'd never thought they'd be used against me. The judge nodded to the clerk, who connected the drive to the courtroom's monitor. The screen flickered to life, and the video began to play. At first, the footage was ordinary, me in the kitchen, making tea, Lily coloring at the table. Then Tom entered, his voice sharp, his movements impatient. He started an argument about the bills, about the laundry, about the dinner I hadn't made. I watched myself on the screen, my shoulders hunched, my voice quiet, my hands trembling. But then something changed. Tom's voice grew louder, his words cruel. He called me names, accused me of being lazy, of being a burden, of ruining his life. I watched as I tried to calm him, tried to reason with him, tried to protect Lily from his anger. The courtroom was silent, every eye fixed on the screen. Then, in the middle of Tom's tirade, Lily's small voice cut through the noise. Daddy, stop. Don't talk to Mommy like that. Tom turned on her, his face twisted with rage. Go to your room, Lily, now. I watched as I gathered Lily in my arms, holding her close, whispering words of comfort, as Tom stormed out of the room. When the video ended, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. The judge looked at Tom, her eyes cold. Mr. Evans, do you have anything to say for yourself? Tom's face was pale, his hands shaking. He stammered, trying to explain, but the judge cut him off. "I've seen enough. Mrs. Evans, you are not the problem here. You are the victim. This court will not allow you to be erased." A wave of relief and vindication washed over me. Ruth squeezed my hand, tears streaming down her face. I looked at Tom, hopping for a flicker of regret, of shame, of love. But he just stared at the floor, his jaw clenched, his eyes full of anger. After the hearing, people stopped me in the hallway. Neighbors, friends, even strangers who'd heard about the case. "You were so brave, Anna," one woman said, hugging me tight. "You spoke for all of us." I smiled, my heart full. "Thank you, I just wanted to be heard." That night, Ruth and I sat on the porch, the stars bright above us, the air cool and sweet. "You did it, Anna," she said, her voice full of pride. "You stood up for yourself. You showed everyone who you are." I nodded, my heart swelling with gratitude. I did it for me, but I also did it for you, for Lily, for every woman who's ever been told she's too old, too weak, too much. Ruth laughed, her eyes shining. "You're never too much, Anna. You're just enough." The days that followed were a blur of relief and exhaustion. I went back to my routines, watering the garden, baking bread, volunteering at the library. I called Grace, told her the news, listened as she cheered, and promised to visit soon. But the pain lingered. Tom didn't call. He didn't visit. He didn't apologize. I wondered if I'd lost him forever, if the price of my freedom was the love of my only son. One afternoon, I found a letter in the mailbox, addressed in Tom's handwriting. "Anna, I'm sorry. I thought I was helping. I thought I was protecting you. I see now that I was wrong. I hope you can forgive me. Love. Tom." I pressed the letter to my heart, tears slipping down my cheeks. I realized then that forgiveness is a choice you make every day, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in ways that change everything. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is letting go of the people who want to keep you small. The days after the hearing were a strange mix of relief and grief. I had won my freedom, my home, my right to be seen and heard. But I had lost something too, a sense of innocence, a belief that love alone could keep a family together. I moved through my routines with a new kind of strength, but also a new kind of sadness. Ruth was my constant. She came by every evening, bringing groceries, laughter, and the kind of comfort only a sister can give. We sat on the porch, watching the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. "You did the right thing, Anna," she said, her voice gentle. "You stood up for yourself. You showed everyone who you are." I nodded, my heart aching. I just wish it didn't hurt so much. She squeezed my hand, her eyes full of understanding. "Healing always hurts, Anna, but you're stronger than you think." Lily was quieter after the hearing. She asked questions, hard ones, honest ones, but she never stopped loving her father, never stopped trusting me. We created new routines, movie nights with popcorn, Saturday morning pancakes, long walks in the park with Daisy. I watched her grow braver, kinder, more resilient, and I knew I was doing something right. One night, as I tucked her into bed, she looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Are you okay, Mom?" I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I am, sweetheart, I really am." She hugged me, her arms tight around my neck. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Lily, always." Tom didn't call. He didn't visit. He didn't apologize. I wondered if I'd lost him forever, if the price of my freedom was the love of my only son. I tried to let go, to forgive, to move on. But the ache lingered, a wound that refused to heal. I threw myself into my work at the library, finding comfort in the quiet order of books, in the laughter of children, in the small kindnesses exchanged between strangers. I volunteered at the community center, helping women who had lost everything, jobs, homes, marriages, find their footing again. I found joy in the simple act of helping others, in the knowledge that I was making a difference. One afternoon, as I was shelving books, a woman approached me, her face familiar. "Anna," she asked, her voice hesitant. I smiled, trying to place her. "Yes, can I help you?" She hesitated, then said, "I was at your hearing. I just wanted to say thank you. You gave me the courage to stand up for myself. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Thank you. That means more than you know. She smiled, her eyes shining. You're stronger than you think, Anna. Don't let anyone make you forget it. As the months passed, I found a new kind of peace. I went back to my routines, watering the garden, baking bread, volunteering at the library. I called Grace, told her the news, listened as she cheered and promised to visit soon. Ruth and I started a tradition of Sunday dinners, inviting friends and neighbors, filling the house with the sound of laughter and the smell of fresh bread. We shared stories, swapped recipes, and celebrated every small victory. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ruth turned to me, her voice full of pride. You did it, Anna. You built a life worth living. You showed us all what it means to be strong. I smiled, my heart full. We all have to be strong sometimes, Ruth. We all have to fight for what matters. She nodded, her eyes shining. I'm glad you fought for yourself, Anna. I'm glad you taught us all how to do the same. As the sun set, I thought about the journey I'd taken, the pain, the loss, the betrayal, the healing. I realized then that healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about choosing to move forward together. And I promised myself that, whatever happened next, I would never let myself be erased. As the seasons changed, so did my family. The wounds of the past faded, replaced by new memories, new traditions, new hope. Ruth and I kept up our Sunday dinners, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with Lily, sometimes with neighbors who had become like family. The table was always full, the conversation easy, the laughter genuine. I found myself looking forward to those evenings, to the warmth of shared meals, to the comfort of being seen. Lily grew into a bright, compassionate young woman. She excelled in school, made friends easily, and never lost her sense of wonder. She asked hard questions, demanded honest answers, and taught me that love is sometimes about letting go and sometimes about holding on tighter than ever. One spring, Lily graduated from high school. The ceremony was held in the park, the air thick with the scent of roses and the sound of applause. I watched her walk across the stage, her head held high, her eyes shining with pride. I thought about the little girl she'd been, the woman she was becoming, the future she was building for herself. After the ceremony, we gathered at the house for a celebration. Ruth brought her famous lemon bars, neighbors brought casseroles, and the house was full of laughter and music. Lily hugged me, her arms tight around my shoulders. Thank you, Mom, for everything, for teaching me to be strong, for showing me what it means to fight for yourself. I hugged her back, my heart full. You're my greatest joy, Lily. You always have been. David came by that evening, his face full of pride and regret. He hugged Lily, congratulated her, then pulled me aside. Mom, I know I can never undo what I did. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust, but I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the way you fought for yourself, for your home, for your life. I smiled, tears slipping down my cheeks. Thank you, David. That means more than you know. He hugged me, his arms strong and steady. I love you, Mom. I always have. I hugged him back, my heart overflowing. I love you too, David, always. As the years passed, our family grew, new marriages, new bobbies, new traditions. The house was always full, the table always set for one more. I found joy in the chaos, in the noise, in the mess of a life well lived. I realized then that the greatest gift I could give my family was not my money, or my house, or even my time. The greatest gift was my example, the example of a woman who refused to be erased, who fought for her own life, who learned to love herself even when it was hard. Sometimes, the people we trust most are the ones who test our strength the hardest. I never imagined my own son would ask for a signature that would cost me everything, or that I'd have to fight for my own home, my dignity, and my place in the world. But life has a way of showing us that our worth isn't measured by what we lose, but by the boundaries we hold and the love we fight to protect. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you love, or if you've ever had to rebuild your life after losing everything, I hope you know you're not alone. I know what it's like to sit in the quiet after everyone's gone, to wonder if you did enough, if you loved enough, if you mattered enough. I know what it's like to feel the ache of old wounds and the hope of new beginnings, to want to hold on and let go at the same time. But I also know that healing is possible. That courage is a choice you make every day, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in ways that change everything. I know that you can be broken and still be whole, that you can be pushed out and still come back stronger, that you can be overlooked and still be the heart of your family. Would you have signed the paper, or would you have asked more questions? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your self-respect? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story, because sometimes sharing our pain is the first step toward healing. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who might need a little hope tonight. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for listening and for being part of this family. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, even after the deepest heartbreak, you can still choose to begin again. And if you want to see what happens when a woman finally chooses herself, or if you believe in the power of second chances, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the next story might just be the one you need.